can I thank the honourable member who's sponsored this bill for the hard work that she has done to get to this point. I believe it has been a baptism of fire in proceeding with this, and I think many people on both sides of the House would like to thank her for what she has done in getting this bill once again back here before the House. I'd also like to thank the Zero Hour campaign, or the Climate and Nature Bill campaign, as it's sometimes been called, all the campaigners, all of my constituents who've never given me a breath or pause to tell me to get here today, to be here again, to vote for this bill. I'm sure many members have also experienced that. I will give way.
I thank him for giving way. Does he think that those members of this House who, before they became members of this House, campaigned in support of this bill and agreed to vote for it, does he think they should be here today and should be voting for this bill?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. Of course, we all understand that Thursdays and Fridays are very difficult days for members to come here. It's time in a constituency. Many people have family commitments, and I wouldn't for 1 second want to stand here and judge anyone for what they may have going on in their personal lives or in their constituencies. But I know that most of the members on both sides of the House care deeply and passionately about this and are here, if they can be, for good reason. And I know many who couldn't be here today. Some have sickness, some have other commitments, but I'm sure everyone who is here today will make a fantastic contribution. Those that can't be here, I'm sure, are still rooting from it and punching the air at their TV screens. So, to continue, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think one of the reasons why we've had so many people come to us, so many of our constituents, why this has made so many headlines, is because it's emblematic of the fact that people feel that there is a shortfall between political ambition and on-the-ground delivery of what we all know needs to happen. And, you know, many people may be critical of my own government in its first 6 months and some of the things it's done, and I may come on to that in a minute. But what I would say is it's doing a lot better than the government before. Now, I accept that is a low bar, which you would have difficulty limboing under. It's so low. But nonetheless, that's the bar. We are doing better than them. But I think many on this side understand we have far more to do, much more to do, a lot further to go, and I believe this government will. There will be a debate, there will be discussion, and I will be part of it, as I'm sure many members on this side and both sides of the House will be. But we cannot get away from the fact that in this country, across the world, there is a growing concern at what is happening to the natural world. Today, we have a weather bomb off of our coast. I've never heard of that before in all of my 50-something years. I've never heard of it. And yet, that is something which we all know in our hearts is something that has come about because of the climate and ecological crisis. We know that we're seeing this more and more often. We understand that we're heading potentially into a dystopian future where food crises, water crises are going to become more and more frequent. We can already see the impact of climateflation, as economists are now calling it. That stubborn inflation, where the basic staples of life, food, water, are increasingly becoming more costly. Many people increasingly becoming priced out of being able to buy and purchase the basic food staples they need. That has an impact on central banks and their duty, as we have given them that political obligation, economic obligation, to try to tackle inflation, this stubborn inflation that won't go away. The fact that we can't seem to get growth in our economies. This is the climate crisis. This is what it looks like. We were warned about it by Stern decades ago. Well, it's here now, and we need to do something about it, and we need to do a lot about it. So I can hear the honourable member chuntering away there. He's more than welcome to make an intervention if he wishes. But I'll continue then in that case. So we understand the situation. I thought the honourable member outlined very clearly, brilliantly in fact, the scale of the challenge before us, the fact that 47% of the biodiversity in this country has been completely obliterated. We're one of the most denuded when it comes to biodiversity and wildlife in the world. The only other country, I believe, or one of the few countries ahead of us, is Singapore. It's at 30%. of the natural world that it has left. That is on the edge, a tipping point for ecological collapse, and we're not far behind. 90% is where we should be, and we're on 53%. We need to improve, we need to move ourselves, we need to act. This bill can help do that. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I think have happened which we in this place still don't quite get, and that is the interconnectedness between climate and nature. I thought the Honourable Member discussed that very well. I wanted to tease out a little bit there in the fact that many of us now see tackling the climate crisis as an economic opportunity. And I understand, and I think there is a lot of mileage in that, but it's quite possible to tackle the climate crisis, to build solar farms, to build wind farms, to do all of the things that we think can decarbonise and yet still kill the planet in terms of its biodiversity. It's entirely possible to do both, and I think we have to ensure that now we have got climate, or many of us in this place have got the climate crisis. Now we need to understand the nature crisis and the crisis of biodiversity. And in my own constituency in Norwich South, we had something called the Western Link, which was a massive road that was going to go through an ancient woodland. And yes, there were bats. I would give way, yes.
I don't want to give the honourable member a lesson in geography, but he will recognise that the Western Link Road is in my constituency and not his.
Obviously, I like to expand the borders of Norwich South as far as possible. I will caveat that by saying it's a big issue in my constituency, and many of my constituents will use that road if it was ever to be built, which hopefully it won't be. I've opposed that, as have many people. And I think that road may now no longer be built because of public pressure. But it's instructive, because we were told that if we wanted economic growth in Norfolk, that we had to build this road, that it was necessary. So I was invited down to the ancient woodland, and yes, there were bats there. And we went down, and I looked, and I know that the carbon offsetting that was being proposed would have meant the planting of tens of thousands of new saplings to replace this ancient woodland and ensure that the carbon sequestration took place and we could still hit our climate targets. And I went down there and I saw flint axe heads, I saw an ancient oak woodland that had been there for tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of years. And the complex biodiversity that was there, the insects, the birds, the mycelium networks underneath the ground. It was beautiful. You could feel how old it was. And it was going to be bulldozed over and replaced with tens of thousands of saplings somewhere else in Norfolk. I will make some progress if that's okay. And at that point, I understood it's entirely possible to hit your climate targets as you rip up and destroy this 10,000, 50,000-year-old woodland. And at that moment, I realised I could never allow this road to be built, because we can look at the Amazon forest and campaign about the Amazon forest and what shouldn't be happening there. But what about in our own backyards? What about there? And I think there's a question for this government, my government, any government, which is about growth. What kind of growth do we want? No one's answering that question. Do we want sustainable growth? What is growth about? What are we growing? Are we growing just pollution in our rivers? Are we growing roads that go through ancient woodlands? Yes, that's growth. But is it the growth we want? Do we not want to see a growth in well-paid adult social care? Do we not want to see a growth in renewable technology? Do we not want to see a growth in rewilding? Do we not want to see a growth in sustainable farming? These are the areas that I want to see economic growth. I don't want to see growth that comes at the cost of my daughter and her generation's future. That's the kind of decision that we in this country and this government has to make. And I'm afraid to say that you cannot have growth on a dead planet. Politicians need to understand that. And for too long, we haven't. You cannot pick growth out of the air and say biodiversity will come in second place, climate will come after. They're all interlinked. You can't have a viable economy unless the climate and nature of your country, of your economy, is working as well together in unity, in synthesis. That's what needs to happen. So I will give way.
For giving way. I agree with his point that the question about what kind of growth we want. Would the honourable member agree with me that if the government were to proceed with expanding Luton Airport, as rumours suggest, that would both fly in the face of advice from the government's own climate experts and economists who say this would not deliver the kind of growth that airport expansion used to do?
I thank the honourable lady for her intervention. Great pun there, flying in the face. I see what you did there. Very good. Look, I will be very clear. This is obviously a decision that hasn't been taken. I, for one, do not believe that it is compatible to have expansion of aviation at these airports. There's 4. There's London, that's already been agreed, Luton, Gatwick and Heathrow. There are some choices that need to be made here. Aviation benefits. There are many of my constituents that cannot afford to fly. Okay, this is, I'm afraid to say, when it comes to choices, everyone wants to see our constituents benefit from the economy. But as we're at the direction that we're heading, and if we go down that path, and I'm afraid to say we've taken the wrong direction, there will be many people on this side of the House who do not want to see that, many on that side. So I believe it's incompatible with having a genuine approach to biodiversity and climate by expanding Heathrow Aviation, and I believe the Climate Change Committee have already stated, before we even get to the 7th climate budget, that this is something that shouldn't be happening. And I'm afraid that's a conversation we're going to have a very hard, honest conversation about. But from my perspective, I don't think that should be happening. So I'm going to conclude now. Yes, okay, thank you very much.
I'm really grateful to my honourable friend, and particularly want to pay tribute to the honourable member for bringing forward this bill, all the academics and campaigners behind it. But listening to the debate, I think the one point that we really do need to draw out when carrying out the analysis is that we need robust scrutiny, and we need to be able to hold government to account through tighter mechanisms. Does my honourable friend agree that it's absolutely crucial in the mechanisms within this bill that they are expedited in order to ensure that government get onto the targets that we've all been talking about?
I thank my honourable member for her contribution, also the work that she's done on climate and nature throughout her political career. Yes, of course I do. Look, everyone understands in government there are pressures on ministers. There are pressures from the Treasury, there are pressures from business, there are pressures from different vested interests, many of them big, many of them powerful, many with big PR wings, many of them with being able to lobby ministers in ways that many of our constituents can't, in ways that nature cannot. Squirrels, bats, newts cannot lobby like BlackRock and others who want that economic growth, who want to make that profit. So yes, it does need to be locked in, it does need to be legislated, and that's what this bill is all about, because there is a choice. There have been organisations and individuals, billionaires, can't stop hearing about them, who have benefited very much from the last 50 or 60 years of propitious growth and wealth building. I will make a little bit of progress because I need to conclude, because I believe other members do want to take part. We have to understand that there have been people who have done very well from this growth. And the problem with growth is this, that in unequal societies, when you get that GDP growth, if you bulldoze over those beautiful woodland forests, if you expand those airports and you get that GDP growth, I will continue to make progress. If you get that GDP growth in deeply unequal societies, it is the top 1%, the top 5% who accrue those benefits. As someone, a woman in the Brexit debate, a working class woman in one of the debates was told that the EU, and I was a Remainer, the EU has given you, you've never had it so good. You've had growth of 3-4% for so many years. And she stood up and she said, but that's your growth, not our growth. And this is what I'm talking about. If we want to have a sustainable economy, a sustainable biodiversity, if we want to actually protect nature, to do what's right, to ensure that future generations have something to live in, have food security, water security, then we need to make sure that this bill or something like it becomes law, and we need to make sure that we, on this side, do the right thing when it comes to climate and nature and what our constituents want to see. Thank you very much.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.